Hello, and welcome to Locutors of Trek, the podcast where we talk about the people, places, and things of Star Trek. So, replicate yourself a Romulan ale or your synth selection of choice, and join us far beyond the stars.
Locutors of Trek.
Program initiated. Enter when ready.
Well, hi, this is Dave,
And I'm Davan.
and we are Locutors of Trek. Now, our topic this week is all things cybernetic. Now, in a wide sense, cybernetics is sort of a question of, machine learning, AI control, networks of, feedback and response and all sorts of stuff. But you know me, I'm first and foremost, right off the top of the episode, the etymology guy. So here we go. Cybernetics ultimately comes from
Cybertron.
millions of years ago. Our robot overlords brought it to us. No, it comes from the Greek kubernetes, which is a job word. Most of the job words in Greek end with an eta sigma, like nautes, that sort of thing. And this one means the steers person of a ship, the rudder operator or tiller person. And so in that sense, it's the study of, steerage,
Steering.
piloting.
Getting feedback and making an alteration
Right.
based on that feedback.
Sure.
Trying to get to a place, being knocked off course, correcting, getting back on course. Basically.
Absolutely. So there's a question, there's something about real time and engagement with reality here.
So,
I think at the very basis.
yeah, I mean, people often think Cybertron or androids or
Sure.
robots when they think cybernetics.
Absolutely.
Or, robotic implants, that type of thing.
I think the field is far wider when we think of everything from the computer intelligence of the Enterprise, whichever one, voiced by Majel Barrett, iconically, or even the kinds of intelligences involved in holodeck programming. All of those are, in a certain sense, while they're also the province of electronics and engineering and computer programming and isolinear chip design and all sorts of stuff, they'd also be, at least in part, the province of cybernetics.
Yeah.
Is that what's that noise?
I don't hear anything.
What?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Okay.
All right, that's
Right
getting
there.
pretty annoying. Fine, I think it's a transport alert.
That's what
Let's see.
I haven't read the manual, but
It is a transport alert.
what's that?
Oh, it's Mr. Scott.
Oh, hey!
Hello again, gentlemen.
Take a seat at the back there. It's very close to the front, but there's a seat for you. Sit in the hall?
Please.
Oh, by all means. Cheers.
Cheers. Bottoms up.
So welcome, Mr. Scott, for another round of Debate 9. For those listeners at home that didn't catch the last edition of Debate 9, Dave, Scott, and I all have 3 debate topics. We will debate amongst each other and hopefully get a winner. If not, we'll phone a friend for a tiebreaker.
Okay. All right.
We will have 30 seconds to debate each topic, followed by a 15-second free-for-all.
Somebody is the timer booper.
I have the timer booper here, possibly turned on.
It's our highest tech piece
We'll
of
find
stuff
out
here.
in a second. All right, who wants to go first? Are we flipping a coin or?
How can a coin flip decide between 3 people? You
Well,
got a D6 anywhere?
Yes, I have a D6 everywhere.
Find a chance cube.
All right, who's lows and who's highs?
I'll take 1 and 5.
1 and 5, okay. I'll take 2 and 6.
I'll take
What's
whatever's left. 3 and 4.
5.
5. Is that me?
That's you.
Oh, great. Okay, here we go.
You claimed those so readily and didn't even remember the numbers you picked.
I know. I just wanted to stake some ground there. Bam,
All
get out
right.
there in front. All right. So we're going to start with just a bit of a gentle entry here. This is actually a viewer suggestion.
Scott has a pen.
Oh, good. That's
I got
excellent.
a pen. I got a pad of paper.
Just wanted
Thank
to make
you.
that
Go
clear.
everywhere with it.
Wanted to make that clear.
He's old-fashioned that way. He doesn't use a pad. He uses a pad.
Exactly.
So, this is from long-time listener, first-time writer, Legate Parn. What you'll be debating. Scott, you'll be arguing for this. Davan against. Romulan ale should be legalized in the Federation. It's high time.
The citizenry of the Federation is far advanced from where they once started, and the responsibility of the individual should be... That was a quick
Keep going.
30 seconds.
I did the wrong one. You got 15 more.
The responsibility of the individual should always be respected, and honestly, the liberty of the individual should be respected in all things, including their decision of drink of choice.
Okay.
Push it longer for the longer one.
Okay.
Makes sense.
All right.
All
Are
right.
you ready?
Yep.
Okay.
Look, quite frankly, until the Federation, or the Romulans perhaps share with the Federation, the cure for the Romulan ale hangover, it would be dangerous, irresponsible, look, just sloppy for the Federation to legalize Romulan ale. Known for its crippling hangovers and its hypnotic aroma and color. It's a danger aboard starships.
Danger aboard starships, appealing to the security-mindedness of the judge. Well, there were good arguments on both
Free-for-all.
sides. Oh, yeah, that's right. So, get the free-for-all going, guys.
Starships are Starfleet, not the Federation, first of all, and even that part notwithstanding, the crew should be entitled to do what they feel is responsible.
Look, do you want to
Individual
cripple the economy
responsibility.
of the Federation by start selling Romulan
Where
alcohols?
does it stop if you're gonna ban this?
Interesting. So we begin on a personal liberty versus harm reduction argument, and we end on an appeal to consider the wider Federation over perhaps the needs of the few or the one, and a sort of reinforcing of that harm reduction strategy, as well as an economic harm angle, which is interesting. I'm not sure what the economic harm might be other than perhaps the sort of hangover brain drain, if that's what you sort of mean. But in this regard, I think I'm going to give the point to Scott. He's made a lot of good arguments that sound like they appeal to a Federation policy mind.
Preposterous, but that's fine. Let's move on.
Preposterous, he says.
Preposterous.
You got 8 more to go.
You know, the interesting thing was that nobody decided to go on the sort of history of the Romulans and the Federation and burying the hatchet that way which would have been an interesting direction, but that's just my
I
comment.
purposely didn't say that.
Oh, interesting. Interesting choice.
They could even legalize it, make a show out of it. The next ship that they commission, make it a bottle of Romulan ale that you throw out to smash on the hull.
See, it takes 9.5 minutes to hit that starship.
All right. Scott's up next. Almost as long as the intro on Star Trek The Motion Picture.
That's precisely it. Oh, that's a long-suffering bottle of champagne.
Okay. Davan, you're going to argue for this. Be it resolved that the Dominion would defeat the Borg in a full-scale war.
The Dominion have the resources of an entire quadrant. They have the cunning of the founders. They have the... Well, look, the ambassadorial qualities of the Borg aren't going to come under it. But the gem... Oh, you have to do it. I get another 15. There we go. Let's do this buzzer right.
Long button.
The Borg... There's nothing really to assimilate from the Jem'Hadar for the Borg to really use against them. The Jem'Hadar would just mow through a cube. It would be fun for them.
You want to be in charge of the button for
Yeah.
the rebut here?
Yeah.
It's finicky.
You hold it till it comes on.
Fun is irrelevant. Diplomacy is irrelevant. cunning is irrelevant. Your species and their complex of economic activities will be useful to us. Your technologies are passing, but your distinctiveness, biological and cultural, will be added to our own. In time.
Cool. And I only talked about the Jem'Hadar. One founder would take out an entire cube. How would the Borg ever stop a founder?
One cube.
And then another founder would take out another cube. And then another founder would take out another cube. There aren't enough
I
cubes
think you've missed the
in
problem
proximity.
of scale. Here.
Also, the Borg can't unite or bring their forces together into one spot very well.
Well,
They
Not
don't.
sure they need to all
Transwarp
that often.
conduits.
Spread, yeah, I know, but they're spread out all over.
and the hive mind.
Who are you arguing for here?
Well, I'm just thinking
is this?
about
I think
the
we found
arguments
Bob.
that are
Resistance
being
is
made.
futile.
I'm just listening to the arguments being made and wondering if they're legitimate or if they're a little bit of a stretch.
All
I
right,
mean,
well,
I think the Dominion would
Make your
give
call.
the
I think
Board
it
a
would be a
huge
battle.
run for their money.
Yeah, I think
Honestly.
sending the Vorta in against the Borg probably isn't.
That's
isn't
not
their,
gonna do
their
well.
best
Just
move.
get a bunch
Although,
of
I just stopped cloning Borda for a while.
I would be curious to see how an assimilation of a founder would work.
Yeah, I don't know if that.
You'd,
I don't
you'd
even know
never
if that would work.
assimilate a Jem'Hadar anyway, because they would probably kill themselves before they allowed it.
Yeah,
Like, they're
no,
not
I
gonna
think
let-
that's. I mean, your point about assimilation is a really well made one
It's
because I
tough
think
against the Dominion.
and in some ways, assimilation of those three species might not be particularly valuable, but assimilation of their area of control and that sort of thing, and thereby getting at all the other
You
species.
assume they even can
may well be.
assimilate a founder.
Oh yeah, I don't. Well, and it's not. That's not necessarily clear. They might just have to eradicate them.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
Which would, I think, be their
I think
other
that
choice.
would have been
Yeah, I know, I didn't get there.
the hook to hang your hat on. I'm gonna give this one to Dave.
This is the challenge, like having to get it on the fly, right? Whew.
All right,
All right.
off to a rough start. Trick is to make it rougher for you guys. Okay. So, I'm sure you're both familiar with the Treaty of Algernon. Now, it's often said that the Treaty of Algernon was a bad deal for the Federation, as it took away their ability to use cloaks against their enemies that can have cloaks. But on the counterpoint, the Romulans, as part of the deal, had to isolate themselves back into their own space, so they don't get to. So there's that counterpoint. Be it Dave, you're arguing for this. You're arguing against this, Scott. Be it resolved, the Treaty of Algernon was a bad deal for the Romulans.
Okay. The Treaty of Algernon only vaguely served Romulan interests, while it did slow down the tide of Federation aggression and forced out their hand away from making any more attempts at stealing cloaking devices or any of that sort of thing. It did seriously hamper Romulan interests in the Alpha Quadrant and forced us into a direction which clearly was crippling for at least a century and a half. By the time we see the Balance of Terror in the original series, the Empire is in a desperate position to stake its claim.
Okay, very good.
A desperate position after a century and a half is better than not being there a century and a half after the treaty has been signed, which had that not been the case, I don't think the Romulans would have been around. It clearly was. It wasn't a great deal. It wasn't as bad as the alternative.
The alternative being.
They wouldn't have been around. Annihilation.
Ah,
Destruction.
okay. The argument that the Federation would have destroyed the Romulan Empire if not for the Treaty of Algernon. Okay, free for all.
This was the reason we took the treaty, of course. Unabated, unslaking human aggression. Never relenting, always trying to provoke some reason for attack. Even when they decide to go into their own neutral zone they made themselves. This is a Romulan response. Fill the diplomatic space.
So Scott says it was a good deal for the Romulans because it saved them from annihilation. Dave says it was a bad deal for them because it isolated them too much. And,
Unslaking human aggression.
and Ooh,
Oh, man.
this is a tough one. I think I'm gonna have to. Scott's argument is based on the assumption that the Federation would destroy the Romulans, but either way, it would be horrible losses on either side.
And it's a period we didn't really see. There's a little bit of an assumption in there for sure.
Yeah,
but
it's
if
tough.
you're at the
yeah.
point that the Romulans of all people are going to accept that kind of a deal, they were clearly worried about their long-term.
Oh, yeah, and I think and anything
Liability.
that is written or sort of extant about the sort of moments around the Battle of Sharon particularly shows that, yeah, they suffered a pretty crushing defeat there. And I think it's one of the big reasons they honestly end up signing that treaty, right? Because they're on a bad footing sort of militarily at that point.
You might have had a tougher argument there, Dave, but I don't think you quite got to where you needed to be to take it.
Okay.
I give that one to Scott.
This is a super Klingon game. I just like to make that. Like, you think about like their sense that like whatever comes out is like a contest. It's a very Klingon game. Kapla.
To myself. All right, back to Dave.
Okay. So, we're going to take a turn to the Positronic.
Oh my.
Data seems to have been intended largely as an android ethically governed by something like Asimov's 4 laws of robotics. Lore, save for his complex emotions, is identically constructed. Be it resolved that emotion necessarily corrupts the ethical function of Sung-type androids. Now, this is kind of a follow-up from a question we explored the first time, but I wanted to really drill down on this particular angle. So,
Where we found out that Data is not insuperior to lore.
not insuperior, exactly. He has, in fact, a not insuperiority complex. I think.
Anti-insuperiority.
So, I'm going to have Davan argue for this, that be it resolved that emotion necessarily corrupts
Necessarily
the ethical function.
does.
Yeah. And I'm going to have Scott argue against that.
Okay.
So the necessity of that.
I mean, because we can't really count B4. We've really only had one example from each camp. So the evidence suggests that it does. I mean, it's a very small sample size, but so far, and Data has gone off the rails a few times under the effect of emotion, whether it be fear, anger, rage overtook him when he killed that Borg. He just had to keep doing it again and again and again, and he enjoyed it. It's corrupting Data is pretty serious.
I hear you.
Lore, we don't know what caused Lore to snap the first time. We know that he didn't get along with the colonists on the planet. We know that they were mistrusting of him, and I think he picked up on that. I'm not sure that it's emotional. It might have been logical, honestly, that caused him to take the turn that he did. Data's emotions, the Borg situation, he went to the holodeck and tried to repeat it and couldn't. And he was confused by that. A logical response to it.
In fact, he did repeat it. He just had to take the safety protocols
He repeated,
off. And then he felt it again, and that's when he realized he liked it. So there seems to be some problem with
even
the
at
logic
that,
of
he
an
went to the
android
planet, teamed up,
crossing the-
and realized this mistake and came back.
Emotions are illogical, and it's hard for them to square that circle.
Okay. These are interesting arguments on
it's a
both
good
sides.
question.
Now, interestingly, you both seem to sort of grant the same ground. That there are these moments where both Lore and Data just lose control. And Lore certainly more than Data. That's just fair to say.
Lore never got the control back.
But I'm not sure we ever see him in a moment where he really has a very much emotional control. And that was a really interesting
Also
point in
doesn't
your
have
argument,
Starfleet
Scott.
training.
Because your point about the fact that we don't know where Lore's sort of path diverged into that sort of resentment and anger and rage and homicidal mania.
I think we
basically.
do. It's being left behind, right?
Well, but there is some sense that he had already these
Sure.
weird relationships with the colonists as well.
Sure.
I confess, though, in some sense, I'm moved by Davan's argument here because it seems like there's a constitutional problem that Sung didn't consider in the androids. That the immediacy of their adult body with a very, very highly advanced cognitive set, but a completely undeveloped emotional vocabulary is something that's utterly inhuman. You know, we have the time to develop from very, very impotent little delightful, cute babies into actually sort of capable, articulate, willful creatures that have a whole range of emotional responses that we've learned to live with. And in that case, I'm going to give it to Davan. That was beautifully argued.
Thanks.
Actually, on both sides, really beautifully argued.
And to what you said, perhaps Soong did actually realize there was that.
Maybe that's why he
crossed
took
wires,
it, shut Laura down. Oh yeah,
and
yeah,
took
that's
the
true.
Emotions from Data. It's like
And you know, the episode Brothers
Never heard
would
it.
testify to that.
Is that a Voyager episode? Moving on. Scott.
All right. So we've seen a number of different captains with their different styles, and we've seen them over several years. We've seen a number of crews that have developed through the courses of their runs. And most of the time, we see, by the end of the run, a crew that has advanced quite a bit. The crew of the Voyager had no promotions. The only change in rank we had was Tom Paris going backwards in rank. He got it back.
And back up.
He got it back, but it's the only thing that Janeway ever
That's
granted
not
to a
true.
crew.
Tuvok got a promotion.
Did he?
He was a lieutenant and started, then became lieutenant command.
Oh,
Was he really?
Yeah.
When did he get promoted?
Later seasons, but it
I don't
happened.
remember
Okay.
seeing it at all.
Yep.
Be that as it may, so that's one promotion out of a crew of about 9.
Yeah.
Whereas Picard had half of his senior staff, and really the only two that didn't were Data and Riker, and they were clearly next in line for a command and so on. Actually, we did see Riker get his own ship. DS9, everyone except for the Chief got promoted. Well, Quark and Jake, but everybody
I
else.
think the chief is already basically at the top
Yeah.
of his,
As far as he can go.
So-
his sort of promotional list. Yeah.
Dave, you're for this.
Okay.
Be it resolved that Captain Janeway, too stingy with the likes.
Okay.
I think Captain Janeway recognizes early on that her situation is a bit problematic and unique. And in the sense that she can't do crew transfers and that sort of stuff, she's got to develop some alternative method of reward and punishment. And so in that sense, she does. She almost completely ignores Starfleet promotional and advancement and sort of cultivating protocols and just tries to grow a family. And so in that sense, she's really stingy with the official kind of promotion.
Now I have to argue what now?
So you're arguing against the fact.
ain't stingy
against
with the likes.
She's not
against
stingy
the
with the
motion
likes.
that Janeway's too stingy with the likes.
She's not too stingy with the likes because she has no communication with Starfleet Command. Like, I don't think, in the grand scheme of things, a single captain is able to grant promotions. It doesn't seem that way. There seems to be some communication with Starfleet Command. I want to promote this person. You know, does their record meet it? Because, you know, captains don't look into the past. You know, they're going to be like, no, well, there's this red flag from the past, so maybe this person shouldn't be promoted. Like with Worf, when they said he may never see
Right.
captaincy.
Okay, back and forth.
The field promotion of Wesley Crusher and a Major Kira and a number of people to ranks that would exceed or bypass their normal chain of promotion, to me says that there are circumstances in which that can happen.
Rank,
Definitely
rank
they have
became
to be
unimportant. Like you said,
confirmed.
there's no rank has no purpose.
But
on
there's no
Voyager.
sense saying that, you know, they can't do it in the field.
Yeah. The field promotion for sure is a bit of a hole, and it's in situations specifically where like you're out in the field, which Voyager couldn't get much further out, right?
My second point: rank
field,
has
yeah.
no purpose on Voyager.
Rank has no purpose is a
A
good
higher
point.
rank.
Is a good point, and it's also one that Dave kind of touched on with the unique situation.
That's why I was confused
An
when I was
alternative
arguing. I thought you
focus.
hung yourself there.
I'm just working clearly, just as hard as I could to hang you out to dry.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But I think what his point there was not that. Well, I guess he's arguing that she is too stingy,
Yeah,
and you're
exactly.
focusing on something on a different focus.
Well, I think that's why she doesn't bother with that stuff, even though for some
I
people
think
like
you hung yourself out to dry.
Harry Kim,
Yep.
that could have been a really
Gave
valuable
me the
thing.
point
Right?
I was going to use.
Yep, I think as I work through it here, I tend to agree. Your argument was sound, but it was for the wrong side of the argument.
Okay,
Dave.
fair enough.
All right, so that's 2 people voting that Janeway should have given up more. Davin takes that one.
All right, we're moving on. Okay, here's a good one. Oh, who do I want to argue this? Scott, you will argue for this. Dave, you will argue against. No, I'm going to reverse that.
Oh no.
Scott's and Scott. Yep.
Okay,
All right.
You're messing up the
so
notes.
I'm starting then.
What? I'm messing up the what?
You're messing up the notes. I can't just erase on paper, you know.
We should take a point from him for that.
Bragging about
He's
his
only
pen,
got one.
wishes he had a pencil.
He's only got
Oh
one.
man.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Dave,
Be
it resolved that unimatrices
okay.
are a closer bond than familial bond.
Okay. Both physiologically and psychologically, let alone at the level of subspace connection, the unimatrix is in fact a closer bond than a familial bond. While it may not have some of the vernacular connections of, dinner and that sort of stuff around it that we like about the family connection, the connection the Borg have with each other is profound, productive, total. It's a kind of perichoresis of the mind of the drones together. Yeah.
Okay. Scott for familial bond.
The familial bond is the stronger one because it's one that you can opt into, and alternatively, you can opt out of it. So if you have a strong familial bond, you are developing that yourself, you're building it, and you are invested in it. If you are a member of a unimatrix, you have no say in the matter. You're just a cog in the hive mind, and there's no like desire to be part of that. So because of that, the familial bond's stronger.
Okay, Dave, I hope you have a counter for what he just said.
Option is irrelevance. The bond that's involved in the unimatrix is total. And in
Even
fact...
if option's irrelevant, you don't get to choose your family. You choose what you do with them.
Right, so you don't opt into the family then.
You opt into the bond. No. You don't choose who it is. You're opting to build the bond that's there.
Oh no.
Okay then.
Scott had it until the last second. Dave gets it. Wow.
That's some bullshit.
Wow.
Swift verbal uppercut.
Wow. That's what it did it, yo.
No, it's a misunderstanding
You
of
had
the
me
point.
on. Scott, you legit had it on the.
This is a misunderstanding of the point. That was whatever.
I don't need
any charity points.
No, I know what you're saying. And you had me there.
Dave on some BS.
But I don't think you appropriately. I don't think
you're.
your argument against Dave's comment that the choosing of it, whether it happens or not, was irrelevant anyway.
All
The
right.
uppercut wins.
So, we're back. This is...
Back to you.
This is me. Okay. Oh, that's right, because that was Davin's question. Sorry. Okay.
You had it almost.
Here we go.
I should have had it.
We've developed a real Borg theme here. So,
Well, this is a
we're both
cybernetics
familiar with season 1 of Picard, of course. For all three of us, I guess. So, given what we learn about the XBs and the cybernetics trade in season 1 of Picard, be it resolved that the Alpha and Beta quadrants must re-examine their positions on cybertech as a whole. Davin, you'll be arguing for this.
That they should re-examine
That
their
they
position
should re-examine
as of Picard. So their
relationship with cybertech as a whole.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Scott, you're arguing against that.
Now, admittedly, there is an undercurrent of anti-cybernetics, anti-artificial intelligence in Star Trek. It often becomes a villain. There's a ban in Star Trek. But that seems to be rooted in some unhealthy places. Whether it be some sort of, us versus them xenophobic type thing. They're a different type of life we don't understand. But it could also be, as they just go in that show, put there by the Romulans. That's something the Romulans fomented in the Federation. Also not good.
Right.
I'd say that they have re-examined, that they've done it a couple of times.
Okay.
The spot where we're at in Measure of a Man, compared to the attack on Mars by the android workforce, the androids wouldn't have been there if they hadn't re-examined the first time and moved off the fact that Data's not a life form. Okay, he is. Let's allow androids to participate in society. They wound up with a station completely wiped out. I think that the ban is an appropriate spot.
Okay. Oh, interesting points on both sides.
The question is not whether they've done the ban before, or done the re-examining before. It's whether should they do it again. And
I'd say their position's
the answer
fresh.
to that is yes, because you can't just have this static positions. We've reached the culmination of the cybernetics issue. That's not the case.
It's only recently they've landed on it, on where they're at, and they did it for good
There's no
reasons.
pinnacle.
Okay. Wow. I mean, of course, I suppose the curveball in all this is Coppelius Station, right? Where you have this sort of alternate possibility with space flowers and all sorts of lovely things.
Beautiful.
But, oh man, I wish we could have like 15 more seconds on both sides.
It's not how the game works.
No, like you've kind of fought my brain to a standstill here. Cripes. I like your point that they've done this a number of times, and maybe they've gotten to a point where they've kind of found a spot where this is an appropriate safe space to be given their recent experience. On the other side, the images of what we see going on in the Borg cube, these sort of destroyed former Borg, who are really having a hell of a time in rehabilitation. Let's just be really honest about that. And the kinds of things that are happening both from that station and to XBs that go along somewhere else. I think about poor Icheb, right? This certainly could be a kind of social push to look at it again. Whether you've argued sufficiently that they must, I think has to be the real question for me. Because it's really an ought, not a real
argument,
question,
I guess,
right?
towards the must was the potential Romulan fomenting of that.
Okay, right.
I didn't really go hard at that idea.
Right. That's tricky. I think on that grounds, I'm going to have to give the point to Scott.
All right.
Even though I think my heart lands on saying, no, we have to look at it right now.
All right. I didn't show up for that one. That's fine. Who's up?
I'm up.
All right.
All right.
I got a little bit of a simpler one here. Get off of some of the Borg and some of these heavy topics. Davan, you're gonna argue. Well, you've argued for an awful lot of these. I'll give you the chance to argue against. Dave, you're gonna argue for this.
Okay.
Short and sweet. Short treks are outstanding.
Oh. I really enjoyed the short treks. The sense of them being a short story that you can just take a really good B plot or an A plot that you can't find a good mirror B plot for and just run that is really interesting. It also allows them to explore narrative possibilities and situations that may not have much of a point in the canon of a show, but are just those brainworms you've got that you want to get on paper and turn out to be a really interesting story to tell. And I think that's the real beauty of them. They're not all perfect successes, but they're great.
There were some amusing episode of Short Treks. You know, the Tribble one is funny and everything. Star Trek is best done when it's given more time. It's usually about developing a larger idea than in the Short Treks. Usually with an A and B plot, which you don't get in a Short Treks. They're fine. They would be better served world building, whereas the way they were used didn't really build out the world much. I mean, it added the Tribble thing, but other than that, it just didn't really build the world. Lower Decks, I think, would handle Short Treks a little better and do a little more world building.
Back and forth.
I can see where Lower Decks, in a sense, has kind of learned from Short Treks that way to like keep it really compact, but to nevertheless do that, as you say, sort of A plot, B plot format. The thing I love about the Short Treks is that they're not doing that because
I can only remember 2 of them.
Well, that's not their fault.
It's not on them. I would say that I remember a lot more Short Treks as individual concepts than I do episodes of Discovery as individual episodes.
I think my favorite one is the one with Tilly and the stowaway
This
girl.
isn't a litigation on Discovery. That wasn't the question.
Well, it wasn't a question about Lower Decks either, but you brought that in.
Well, I meant that they would just do a little more world building. That was more a point about world building.
Yeah. I mean, I think
as it puts itself more in the world.
your point about the challenge of brevity, I think, is very well made that way. Honestly, I mean, I think the brevity
that was
is kind
tough.
of
I like the short treks. I didn't really like the position I had to argue against. So, like, in the point about remembering two of them, I mean, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. But anyway,
Yeah, the B plots, the B plots are good. The ability to explore stuff that you maybe wouldn't spend an entire.
do they
episode
feel
on
like
is good.
Star Trek as much because they don't really explore a big idea. They're just more like a scene from Star Trek.
well, and I think you're right. Like one of the characteristic things
They're
about
presented as that too.
Trek stories is that microcosm, macrocosm, A, B kind of revolving mirroring thing, right? And so in that sense, they were an interesting departure that way, right? And I think also a great way to like grab clicks
Tough
with like
question.
really short
It's like
clips.
all mad like opinion, basically. We have to convince Scott he didn't like the short treks, basically.
No. There's arguments against them. The world building, like they use them to set up what presumably we're going to see in Strange New Worlds. They use them as a little bit of the background for the launch of Picard.
And season 3 of Discovery, I think, too. They did a little bit of that in the Callisto one, right? Sort of. I don't know how much that connected.
We're going to
there
have to see how much that comes back at the end. That's the like
I think they might have forgot about that.
way in the future one. Well, it's another question too: is how much of these are like part of the canon of Star Trek, or and how much of them are sort of like, I don't know, like a little one-off song that the writers get to do.
Kind of what if stories or something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I you could tell that your heart wasn't in this one too, Davin. Sorry to say, Dave, you're gonna take that one too.
Well, thank you.
It wasn't. I kind of liked them.
They're fun. They're really fun. Yeah.
All right. It's not looking good. It's looking good for Dave, I think.
Actually, it's Dave and I both have 3 points.
Oh my. Oh my.
This one's for all the
This one's for all
the cheddar.
marbles.
Essentially.
Or it's for a 3-way tie.
how's Davin gonna pick up a point when he's asking the question?
I'm asking the question.
Oh, that's true. That's fair.
All right. This is for the marbles.
I've shown that if this were a math contest, I would already be in last place consistently.
Come on,
Two
math,
questions here,
math.
which one
Pick
do
the
I-
math heavier one.
Two
Steer clear of
trains
ships.
are leaving Earth and Romulus.
Aha! Because you just said steer clear of ships, this is the question.
Oh, good.
And you can argue for it. If
You
you want to
being
steer
me.
clear of ships, you, Scott.
Okay.
Scott, be it resolved, transporting is indeed the safest way to travel.
Well, mirror universe notwithstanding, in which case you're fine anyways, you just beam into the wrong place. How many accidents do you really hear about in the transporter? And if there is an accident, you got the transport buffer, beam up a new version of whatever's in the cache. You travel by ship can explode. Travel by the turbolift, it can plummet to the bottom of the tube. No one ever gets hurt in the transporter, so it's obviously very safe.
You want to use Scott's?
Okay. So the first problem of a transporter-based thing is you have to either be the Iconians with their portals or the folks in the Delta Quadrant with the spatial trajector. Transporter itself can't actually do it for you over the long range that's required. So you always have to rely on a ship. Transporter may be very convenient, very quick, only occasionally puts pieces of tree through you or space worms or giant horrible ghost visions or, makes you disappear for the rest of your father's natural life and he goes searching for you. But the ship has to be there. Transporters are a death trap.
The use of the transporter, it doesn't impact the safety of it. And even if
Death
that
trap.
is the case, JJ says you can beam from Earth to Kronos, so don't worry about that
Oh,
either.
JJ says. Oh, you got me laughing. You just spent the last 10 seconds that with JJ says. Talk about swift verbal uppercuts. Kabam! He got me with the liver shot with JJ there. Oh, that one hurt. Oh,
Here's what's
my
funny.
God.
Dave, you won purely by accident.
Oh, how did I do that?
Just with your... Or at least I don't think that's what you were trying to say. I think you were just being a bit facetious when you said transporters are a death trap.
Oh, yeah.
But what that made me think of is that even you on the other side? Which made me think maybe it is a complete death trap. Dave wins.
No, That wasn't his argument
But
at all.
he said it, and that's what it made me think. The other thing was when Dave said
The odds-
they only occasionally put a tree through you and stuff. I started to think about it, and it's not as actually as occasionally as Dave made it out. You're actually underplaying your argument a little bit.
Think about it this way: they beam down to ships. They don't take the shuttles down
Yeah,
because it's
fast.
safer.
It's
Oh yeah,
fast.
it's way more convenient. Absolutely,
safer.
I
right?
think that's
They wouldn't be doing
convenient.
that if it was.
Well, and I think the question is the cost-benefit analysis, right? Like just the same way we
It's
use
a tough-
airplanes or
The
that sort of thing. That,
cost of losing a shuttle because they're prone to crash.
or I mean, the
You get
risk
Geordi stuck
of
down there with a Romulan under the
not
storm.
being able to pull somebody up from the surface because there's huge ionization of the atmosphere doesn't outweigh being able to transport over to the ship that's right beside you with its shields down, right? Like the occasional inconvenience that way.
You know,
make a
Dave, you
lovely
could
point
have
that way.
probably won with one word as well. It was a tough argument for you to make, I gotta say, because there's just so many questions about the transporter.
Thomas Riker.
Tom, right? Well, you could have just said Tuvix.
Tuvix, yeah, that's true.
That's true. Just one word. I yield the remainder of my time.
It causes a horrible accident for two people and murder for one person. So you know, you were in a bit of a hole you had to dig out of there,
murder
but I
by
think your
pattern buffer.
path to victory might have
Oh my god.
been distracting me from the potential risks of transportation. It's
was
like maybe if you
hilarious.
built up more of the
JJ
dangers,
says
like
so.
you did. You said ships
I
explode and things
know,
like that. But
You still need the ship. Yeah, of course you do, but you're riskier on the trip to wherever you're going than you are once you're there and just beaming down to the planet. Space pirates.
yeah, I guess I wasn't convinced that the benefits of the transporters weren't due to convenience and not safety. Like they'd use them on Earth too, like in Picard. Those ones that just bing, 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 bing.
Oh, yeah.
Again, that's a convenience thing because they just want to go to France, to San Francisco, or whatever the shit.
Yeah. And it's true, like it's become as routine a technology as like microwaves are for us.
So I'd
I
love to
think.
know how those ones work though, because people can just walk at them at random and it works.
Yeah.
I found those in.
I wonder if they're like
Programmed
almost
in
like
beforehand.
the Iconian thing, where it's just, you know, you get on this train, you get on the train that's going to take you to Manhattan
Mm-hmm.
or to the Bronx, versus you walk into this transporter, it takes you to Paris instead of.
Yeah, it
Buenos
might be
Aires
just
or
like a
something.
dedicated pad in that
yeah,
sense, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Right, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
And that'd probably be a way simpler technology in that sense.
Yeah,
You
because
just, like,
then you just
plonk it
need
down
the
and-
two.
Yeah, right?
Quantum entanglement.
Ooh.
Well,
We still don't have a winner here.
yeah,
do
we
we?
do Dave.
Ah, son of a gun.
Dave made
Ah, dang.
more cases on how it's dangerous. It's like,
No,
it
he
could be a
made more
tree,
cases
it
about
could
how
be
you
a-
still need a ship. He didn't even
Certainly
talk
gave
about
more
that. Ah, it
instances
doesn't
of
matter.
times it went wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Your
It's a good old
examples about
rhetorical
when ships
strategy,
flew up
though,
and
right?
stuff
It's
were a
like
little
the,
bit, little bit.
the what is that? It's like the reverse of the Sorotes argument. How big is a heap? Let me heap things up until it overwhelms.
Well, that's the end of this edition of Debate 9. We now have Scott with 1 victory, Dave with 1 victory, me with moral victory.
Moral
Oh,
victory.
Moral victory!
pound of bacon.
Which is aiming for some more gazpacho.
Moral kapla, we call it.
Indeed, that's it.
All right, thanks, Mr. Scott.
All right.
Pleasure as always, guys.
Safe transporting away.
Thank you. Adios, amigos.
Sounds good.
Hasta luego.
Cybernetics can have a lot of definitions. The study of purpose and the things that have purpose.
Oh, I like that a lot.
The study of systems theory.
Sure, could have huge valences with cybernetics, yeah.
The study of control in biological organisms, humans and animals.
Which asks an interesting
Control
question for us
systems.
around data, and particularly the androids of Capelius Station.
Well, that seems an obvious place for us to start. Because what people are going to think of when they think the Cybernetics episode of Locutors of Trek is they're going to talk about data.
Positronics. Here
And
we
certainly Noonien Sung would had to have been a great cyberneticist.
Sure.
But he also would have had to have been an amazing roboticist.
Sure, because
the
that cybernetic package doesn't need to have a humanoid-shaped robot, ship to steer in that sense, right?
No.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I don't see no points on your ears, boy. But you sound like a Vulcan.
No, sir. I'm an android.
And,
the same-
it's like it's describing systems that have goals, acting, sensing, comparing.
Sure.
So I kind of imagine that's what Data's brain is doing. where it's not working well. I mean, it's probably what our brain is doing too, actually. But it's just he
In some
just
respect,
created
yeah.
all of these systems, hundreds of thousands of them.
Yeah.
Nooney and Sung must not have slept very often, but of just all these individual acting, sensing, comparing, altering
Yeah. And, the
loops.
one of the interesting
Feedback
things about
loops.
Data, I think, is that he has a far more ready access to those systems in himself than we tend to in our own selves. If we're the sort of meat cyber version, our control systems, other than through, maybe doing stuff with the vagus nerve or breath control or that sort of stuff, is in many ways out of the reach of most of us, accessing those real core control systems, either physiological or, in that sense, reaching into the unconscious. If you wanted to stretch this analogy farther, our kind of positronic matrix in the brain.
I remember every fact I'm exposed to, sir.
Here's something to think about, Dave. Can a technology, data, lore, for example, have desire and act on that desire? Or is it irresponsible to suggest that Sung isn't responsible for the technology he made?
Right. And so, if I'm understanding the question rightly, is there some way in which the manifestation of a kind of spontaneous purposiveness or orientation towards something?
Yeah, is the desire just part of Sung's programming?
Yeah, is that a sign of a sentience that's moving under its own lights, or is it just the sophistication of the programming? I mean, I think at some level that's really tricky, because if the imprint of the creator, in this case Sung, is so active and powerful at every level that even the most minute responses somehow have that, that thumbprint in the clay of Data's being, I think materially it would be hard to argue Sung out of the picture. But phenomenologically, experientially, I think that question is moot, because the experiencer is Data. I think we come back to that beautiful argument that most of us know from, say, Descartes Meditation 2, but which, has existed for at least 2,000 years before that, which is, I experience, I think, therefore I am. And that irreducibility of the experiencing subject, I think, argues at least to some degree in favor of Data, as long as we can understand that constellation of, kind of proto-selves or proto-perspectives inside him, and the data points you were talking about earlier, to be able to constitute into some kind of unified sense of self.
And do you think Data's positronic brain works more like ours, or works more like machine learning, which is, just pattern matching?
I think it's
Like
got to
extremely
exceed that.
super fast.
I think it's got to exceed that at some level, because of his ability to create. And, that may be me reaching back to
Well, one of the early goals of cybernetics.
very early senses of what a human being or what a person is in that sense, right?
Yeah, well, one of the early goals of cybernetics was actually to have two machines talk to each other.
Right. And what would they talk about? It would be fascinating. There's a really chilling movie from, I think, the 70s, early 80s. Is that called Project Cyclops? Am I right about that? Is that the film? No, that was a NASA project about how SETI should be conducted. Never mind. But anyway, it's this film about this absolute supercomputer that's built by the Americans, fearing that the Russians are going to build a similar supercomputer. And ultimately, once the two computers arrive in contact with each other, having escaped in that respect the control of their creators, the two of them just decide that this is foolish, and they just start running everything. And I think that kind of a fear, the fear of automation, the foreboding or potential foreboding aspect of, a sort of takeover by robots or androids or all sorts of things, is one of those kind of base features of a lot of Star Trek commentary. If you think about a lot of original series episodes, many of them are about technology run amok.
Oh, yeah.
And almost every machine intelligence we meet in the original series has some kind of horrific problem. And that, in some sense, pursues the basic premise of the series, which we've already talked about in some sense, is this mediation between a sort of completely passionate approach to life and an entirely logical, measured approach to life.
And that was a big product of the time as well. When these technologies were new, cybernetics was new. Cybernetics,
especially in its contemporary computer capacity.
Yeah,
right?
and in the more modern context, because it has its roots in more of a political context.
Okay, go on.
Like I say, it was the study of systems, and it was it first got coined cybernetics from the
Sure, the steersman, the Kubernetes, yeah.
It was supposed to be a study on governments, and they were using it to study governments and
right,
and like the systems of control, right? The systems of control of
sure,
society and things like
sure. And I can see that sort of falling in line with some of the considerations of continental French philosophy, particularly at the time, the notion of the event, of the longue durée or courte durée, even some of the stuff that will come up in the bioethics of Michel Foucault in the sense of the panopticon, as he understands it, in the sort of birth of the prison complex. That's the wrong title, of course. That's not even a Foucault title. But.
And then picked up again by, people like Norbert Wiener, Warren McCulloch.
Sure. I think Wiener's
Margaret Mead.
credited with, in some sense, kind of popularizing
Yeah, I
the
think
term,
so.
right?
And what was the name of his book? Like Men, Machines, and the Things That Control Them, or something like that?
Yeah,
Something like that.
yeah. So
Sorry,
it's a
Norbert.
field that's actually got a reasonable amount of depth, even though it's been largely speculative up until the last, say, 60 or 70 years. In terms of the ways that we're often talking about it now, at any rate.
And what I find so fascinating about it is it's such an interdisciplinary, it's not a discipline, it's very interdisciplinary. It's a method you can apply to many disciplines. And
Yes.
That's why all these people that started it up in the 40s and 50s, mathematicians, there were, one was a physician, I think.
Yeah. I mean, one of the more important contributions in some sense culturally has come not from anybody like that, but from a board game and a role-playing game designer named Mike Pondsmith, who's responsible for the entire notion of cyberpunk, right? Which we see actually represented really beautifully in some respects in the first season of Picard, to my mind, in really profound ways, especially out in, Free Cloud? Where we see, this incredible fusion of the holographic, the neon, the sort of anti-grav, and the implanted tech, really powerfully displayed there. Pondsmith, of course, is widely considered prescient for his sense of how corporations coming to understand themselves as control systems begin to interface with technology understood as control systems, both at a neural and at a sort of social, functional, practical level. And I think in some ways, we see that fusion as well shown in its sort of noir aspect, which cyberpunk does in Free Cloud as well. That sense of a future that's got its rough edges.
Back to Data when
we got pretty far away there.
Oh, well, that's going to happen a lot.
Light years or two.
It'll always come back to Star Trek, or at least begin with Star Trek.
We'll just get back to the Guardian of Forever and we'll be fine. Anyway, go ahead.
I am the Guardian of Forever.
I do not like Captain Baudet.
Oh, anyway. He doesn't like him either.
I can see the Guardian of Forever not liking Captain Baudet.
I am the Guardian of Forever.
I have to listen to all his stories.
I do not like to see his brain. Anyway, back to Data.
But yeah, so in The Offspring, when Data decides he wants to have make a child.
And her name is a palindrome.
Is it?
Lol.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Sorry, I just realized that right now. Anyway, go ahead.
That's funny.
While I derail everything.
It's like when you get to choose your own appearance and your own sex. She's like, oh. She looks at Deanna. I choose your sex and appearance. That would be confusing. But anyway.
As much as I can see why you would do that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a good choice. You have taste.
Indeed. In a classic Kids in the Hall line, I was flattered, but stern.
Classic. But yeah, so that episode starts off where Data had just gotten back from a Cybernetics conference. So what I want to ponder here for a moment is a Starfleet Cybernet or a Federation or whatever it is, Cybernetics conference, or maybe it's not even whatever this is, the Cybernetics conference.
Sure.
Is it just about androids and things like that, or is it about
He's like, look at him. He's coming quick. He's gonna be here in 10 seconds.
Everyone wants to stare at Data.
Exactly.
Or is it applying the method and theory of cybernetics and control theory and systems theory to all of these disciplines that they can apply it to?
Sure.
Like not just robotics, not just computers, but maybe they're applying it to politics. Maybe they're applying it to business.
Well, it's an interesting question, because certainly by the time we see the cybernetics department at the Daystrom Institute in the first season of Picard, it's essentially been boiled down to androids and shut down.
Yep.
Which means that whatever gains they'd made from it, apart from that, they're going to, look at from some sort of applied dimension as opposed to sort of theoretical cybernetics. But I can only imagine that certainly by the time Data's attending that conference, the discussion has bubbled up about whether we should be talking about androids all the time. I imagine that Bruce Maddox heads up a panel at this conference and talks to people, in regards to this sort of stuff, Positronics and that sort of thing. And somebody else is out there saying...
Data and Maddox at the same conference at some point. No, they definitely were.
They definitely were at that conference together. Maddox would get a ticket to any conference Data was at.
They were pen pals.
Exactly, right? So anyway, at this conference, I can only assume that, they've got their panel, but there's a number of other panels saying, we need to be looking harder into the implicit reasoning of neural gel packs, right? Or how the functioning of dynamic intersystems sort of control on a starship can result in greater efficiencies or that sort of thing. I'm sure that there are lots of people who are saying that, we just need to do this to help people in the classroom or all sorts of stuff. I'm sure there are people arguing that, like, no, androids are, obviously they're cool.
No.
But they can't be the only thing we talk about.
Does Bruce Maddox, as a renowned cyberneticist, go to all of those conferences or all of those seminars, or is he really just an androidist?
That's an interesting question. I assume for professional interest, you've got to want to keep up on this stuff. But having gone to a couple, like not an enormous number, but having gone to a couple of academic conferences myself in my time, they tend to be scheduled pretty densely. So there's constantly stuff happening. It's like, events at cons and things like that. There's always something on the main stage, something elsewhere, right? So it would be interesting to see what path he picked and chose between the various tables to see what his thoughts were on the scene,
In early TNG, Beverly was working on regenerative cybernetics.
Yeah. Which, like, cybernetics that could self-repair, ultimately, is what I'm thinking. Is that what she's meaning by that? Or is this cybernetics that help to regenerate the healing body?
I don't know.
I
would assume maybe the second, where she's a doctor.
Maybe
and
so.
They get it, and she kind of branches that into nanotech. She has the nanites.
Oh, yeah.
That can heal you.
Right.
And that made me think. So if she was working on regenerative cybernetics, isn't that also what the doctor who saved Worf from his spine injury was also working on?
But they were working from the perspective of cloning tissue perfectly, I think. So they were creating and building a replacement
spine,
Klingon spine, which is a complex affair to get right.
There's cybernetics involved there.
Yeah, I imagine the way in which you're going to 3D print that up. Interestingly, 3D printing of pork has begun in China, as well as 3D printing of muscle fibers to help repair and reintroduce motion and nerve function in post-trauma patients, depending on the kind of injury they received. And apparently that research, which is, just published a few weeks ago, or maybe last week, I guess, when I saw the headline, demonstrated that the learning which occurred was actually happening at a rate far greater than they had assumed, which makes me think of the old cybertech notion of skill softs, downloadable skill sets that we could, program ourselves with for limited times or bring to bear.
But I think that's kind of where I wanted to go next anyway.
Right on. I mean, it makes me think of the Suliban. Where does it take you?
Well, okay, if we're talking about like downloaded, just evolutionary upgrades, essentially.
Sure.
In that case.
But now, where was it taking you?
Well, no, I was thinking that too.
Okay.
That part of it, but just basically cybernetic enhancements that we see in Star Trek. It's a big thing that we see, whether it's Geordi's visor,
sure,
or the Borg.
Sure, whether they're therapeutic
or
an
the
intended
binars.
augmentation. Yeah, the binars. Even the slicing device that hooked to the side of the guy's neck in Deep Space Nine.
In what now? What's that in binar?
Oh my gosh.
We're not tapped in like a binar pair.
See,
yet.
That might happen very quickly.
If we ever change the name of the podcast to the Binars of Trek,
that's true.
Then you'll know that the surgery was a success.
Yeah, see the Ethernet port in the back of the skull there. So anyway, these sort of skill softs and things like that are part of a whole notion of changes to the body, therapeutic or otherwise, like from Picard's replacement heart to Geordi's visor to, as you said, Borg implants, which are intended to either meet or replace or exceed biological function, and to, at some rate, integrate relatively seamlessly with the body of the user.
Okay, so here's a question for you, Dave.
Okay.
Are we, you and I, already cyborgs because we offload so much of what we would otherwise have to do with our own brains and bodies to the environment around us?
We are the Borg.
That's an
like,
interesting
think
question.
of the amount of things you don't have to remember because the reminder is in the environment around you.
Sure.
Just as an example.
There's my pajamas on the chair.
You don't have
I
to
should
remember
go to
your
bed.
street name. You see that street sign every day.
Sure. Yeah. And for instance, I don't have to remember all my favorite books. I can just carry them around in my pocket where the internet lives, right? Absolutely, I think we are in some respect cybernetic creatures that way. Digitally cybernetic in particular. But, I mean, I've been wearing glasses since I was, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old, something like that, maybe 12 years old.
Bragging.
So this right here, set of lenses that I know, they don't give me any increase in the visual range.
He calls them
which would be
his
nice.
cybernoculars.
That's right, my cybernoculars.
Ulors on this.
I'm sorry, that's true. They're my advanced sensors.
Exactly.
In the visual acuity range.
Exactly.
That in some sense is a piece of technology I require all the time. Otherwise, I would mainly perceive the world as blurry colored shapes, as opposed to just regular colored shapes that I see right now.
Starfleet and Picard would be after you, Dave. Cyborg, they would say. No, but specifically androids, they're not too happy.
Yeah. Well, and androids they're extremely curious about,
sure.
but in some respect, I think threatened by. And we can see that in the kinds of discussions you see in Measure of a Man as well, right? And there does seem to be a sense in Star Trek as well that cybernetics, particularly implanted cybernetics, can give a person a kind of tricky advantage. There's something sort of underhanded about a lot of the uses that we see in that, which I think is very interesting because I can only imagine that a lot of things, that comment is never made about the Universal Translator, which is an obvious implanted piece of cybernetics. Or cyber technology at any rate, that everybody needs and uses. And we see that point really eloquently made in Little Green Men, where, is it Quark's Universal Translator is knocked out of service for a couple of hours and they have to repair it.
And really, though, it's external, like all the things that the comm badge does.
Yeah.
Things like that.
But you have, these sort of suites of technologies that are hooked together. And we talked about that, I think, in our first episode, the very complex interrelations of the ship's computer, the subspace communication with the communicator, and then the relationship with the universal transmitter,
We
which
were
I think
so
can
young
only
back then. Not Negvar days young, but young.
yeah, not back that far. Well,
No, I won't. It hurts too much. It hurts too much.
yeah, Jacques-o.
Yeah, Jacques.
So, one of the most underhanded uses of cybernetics that occurs to me in much of Star Trek. Not all of it. I'm sure you could find other underhanded uses, but one of the really cleverly, dastardly underhanded uses is the near subjugation of an entire planet of people by the wicked Ardra.
Ardra.
Indeed. Ardra, the savior and destroyer of the culture of the people. Now, what planet? What's the name of their planet?
I'll tell you one thing, though. She is not Feklar.
No, that's true. She is not Feklar, although she does a good Feklar impression.
Pretty good Feklar.
This is the Ventaxian people who, many hundreds of years before, had been on the verge of a sociological, climatological, ecological collapse. Mm-hmm. And as their shared narrative history tells it, or their mythological history, the being Ardra showed up and helped them to fix these problems, but declared that Ardra would return at some point many hundreds of years later in order to claim and take possession of the planet after this period of bounty. But what it comes out to be, in the end, no spoilers, I hope.
We always forget to announce our spoilers
That's
on
true.
this show.
That's true. That's maybe my first good spoiler alert.
One of them.
We should just get a red alert noise or something.
Oh, doing it.
Great. So, Ardra, it turns out, has a very sophisticated, but not completely uncommon, piece of cybernetics, an eye implant, an ocular control and interface.
Like you'd have with the verbal kind of reading machines that, Stephen Hawking would use.
Absolutely.
He did a lot of that with his eyes.
Absolutely. So she simply, by minute movements of her eye and a projected HUD display on her field of vision, can choose from a series of options and control many of the functions of her relatively advanced starship from orbit, which has some kind of stealth capacity. At least it's shielded, or was hiding and is cleverly shielded that way, but has a series of holographic force field and gravimetric emitters that produce the entirety of the effects that she's able to show the Ventaxians and convince them of her power. It turns out Ardra isn't her name, of course. She goes by a number of aliases. Feklar. She's gone by Feklar.
Satan, I believe.
I think she's gone by Satan. That's right. Now what's...
But it turns out Picard can do all those tricks as well.
Indeed. And as it turns...
Picard also does a good Feklar.
He does. He does a very good Feklar. Now, what happens is they've managed to, undertake a covert action and capture the ship, which we don't see in the episode. But I sort of like it that that's the part of the Starfleet action that we don't see in the episode, That's their sleight of hand as opposed to Ardra's sleight of hand. That's a really interesting upper hand, or upper eye, I guess, to gain on these dupes that she's trying to make of the Ventaxians.
Well, you can certainly use cybernetics for ill-gotten gains, as Ardra does. Mm-hmm. But, on this show, we like to steer, if you will, to coin a phrase, the way towards the Star Trek future as best we can.
We'll tack toward optimism here.
Indeed. So the question becomes, how can we use cybernetics to get us to that future? Now, what that brings to question is, how are we going to design our cybernetics?
Sure.
Whether that's, robots or implants or computers, computer learning
Sure.
AI even,
Sure. Could quantum computing in that sense be understood as somehow contributing deeply to the notion of cybernetics?
Yeah, are we going to make that technology with humane values,
Sure.
like a data, for example?
Sure.
That seems to be what, the key to what Soong did with data is.
Absolutely.
However he programmed those cybernetics in that positronic brain, he did it with humane values.
Yeah.
But, our cybernetics could be designed with business in mind.
Absolutely. And that would trend
be
us
Ferengi,
more toward the Ferengi or the sort of Mike Pondsmith cyberpunk future, right?
Sure.
And you raise an interesting point there because, to me, one of the questions that we've got to get at in a basic sense is to what degree do we, want to proceed from in the present? And, if you look to the present moment, there are a number of therapeutic cyber technologies coming out. The most famous one, I think, probably right now is Elon Musk's Neuralink, which famously, I think, had a chimp playing Pong, I think, last year. Which, honestly, if you could give me some thingers and let me, my dream for that would be to get a Neuralink that could pull the music in my head out and put it into a DAW, so that I could write that way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be wonderful. And the Neuralink is a really exciting technology that way.
Yeah.
Especially in terms of therapeutic helps for people with neurological or muscular or simply, neuropathic problems.
Klingon spine issues.
Exactly. That kind of stuff, right? I mean, that would be really exciting.
But, our cybernetics could also be made, which is where we get to the Borg.
We will add your biological and technological distinctiveness to our own.
With the technology as the value. Technology just as a feedback loop on itself, positive feedback loop on itself.
Sure.
It's just the technology starts creating technology and technology and technology.
And I think that worry is pretty implicit in the Star Trek future.
Certainly for the Romulans.
Certainly for the Romulans. and I think by the time humans pass through the genetic or the eugenics wars in the Prime timeline, there develops a kind of excitement about the future mixed with a technological conservatism. Not a sort of anti-technological bent in any respect, but one that wants to make decidedly incremental steps and make sure that those are going to be well grounded before they move forward. There's a kind of sense of understanding science as one aspect of our society, but as profoundly a social institution that has to function with all the other kinds of things that we do, which is interesting given that, humanity tends to produce really bright scientific minds as well.
What I like about cybernetics is it kind of gave me some insight and vocabulary into a method of thinking I think I was using anyway.
Okay.
Because what modern cyberneticists will discuss is where its method differs from the mainstream scientific method.
Okay.
Is, science comes from the word, I believe, to cut.
Okay. Interesting.
Which is, isolate something, study that.
Sure, and that's sure and certain knowledge.
Isolate that down further and study that, isolate down that further.
Sure.
But at a certain point, you lose sort of the holistic whole of perhaps what you were studying in the first place. You know? And what cybernetic thought or method is very contrary to that, where it's all about this holistic kind of feedback approach, where it's just like, does this work? Change this. What does that do? Do this, but never lose kind of track of the whole. Whereas it's not about isolating things down and
right
because it's so interdisciplinary too.
Right.
So I've always sort of had this holistic kind of approach to science and philosophy and thought in general, and it kind of stems from, kind of I think early spiritual studies and stuff in my teens maybe, but where it really comes from is like everyday work with my sustainable landscaping.
Sure.
Where it's all about this holistic approach to the environment, recognizing the living, breathing entity that it is. And I think sometimes in science we may lose track of that a bit. Now, it's certainly necessary in some degrees. Like, you have to specialize. You have to kind of focus sometimes. But I think, certainly I've noticed it in medicine and other types of science as well, where I think they do lose the holistic. It would be great if we could have these cybernetics conferences where we bring all these disciplines together and just sort of discuss where they connect and what they can learn from each other and those types of things. And,
Well, it's interesting you make that point, because
which I guess is what a think tank is. But
in a certain sense, yeah. But one of the developments that has occurred, and it certainly had been occurring before I got into healthcare, but has increasingly been emphasized during the years that I've worked in it, is absolutely an interdisciplinary care team, for instance, right? So you're drawing from, physios, from OTs, from social work, from medicine, from nursing, from, respirology, all sorts of things, from spiritual care, from security, the whole global sense of a person, from rec therapy, all these dimensions, to get as many possible viewpoints on the person that can kind of build a picture of the person for whom we're caring, so that we don't lose sight of them within all of the various individual systems we may be really good at looking at holistically as a single system, and that's a tricky thing, because that kind of an environment, and I think there are probably others too, have a certain reductive quality about them, in that, when you're in there, you're not the person you necessarily were, you're not connected as immediately to the things you were connected to outside, and some of those things aren't going to happen, and the places aren't going to be there. And so it's very quickly easy to become boiled down to your parts, much like Maddox boils Data down to, and Riker does so devastatingly with the switch and turning Pinocchio and the puppet strings.
Strings are cut. Pinocchio is broken.
Exactly. That's a devastating argument, precisely for the power of its reduction. But Picard, in that same trial, asks all of us, if you put us on a table, would we not also be a sort of messy pile of parts? If we don't allow that interior to speak and say, no, I exist, I perceive, I think, I feel, which, that last one is harder for Data to say, but he might be able to say something like, I have purposes and desires and intentions.
But you know what that also made me think?
What's that?
Of a renamed Simple Tailor.
Oh, throw it out.
We are the plain simple Tailors. I don't think we announced that at the beginning of this episode for maybe the first time ever.
That's true. We may have skipped that by.
We've changed our intro. Normally it's different. Go back and listen to all our episodes to find out and let us know.
Every single one.
Every single one, yeah. The secret cyberneticists.
Oh, I like that.
Because I felt like I was a secret cyberneticist.
That's very nice.
When I went down the rabbit hole on cybernetics.
Like crypto
in preparation
Kubernetes.
for this episode.
Yeah, it's a fascinating rabbit hole to dive down,
I drank my Margaret Mead and I ate my Norbert Wieners.
Oh, my.
They call me the Punish. No. I'll stop now.
A man with a shocking lack of cybernetic parts, given the numbers of holes punched into him. Anyway, that wider sense of cybernetics we get into often enough in the interactions in, odd moments when the hologram, the holodecks go weird, or when that sort of thing happens. One of the standout characters or moments, to my mind, that way is in fact Voyager's Doctor, who has a length of time spent with him as a feeling construct, which is very different from the time we spend with Data as a construct fascinated by feeling.
Yeah.
I think the first moment we meet the Doctor in the pilot of Voyager, is wonderful. He's just such a crap. He's like, why am I here? Don't you have a medical officer?
Unlike Data, who in The Offspring has to say to Lol while she's dying that I wish I could feel that love
Yes.
as well. And she's like, I will feel it for both of us. And as it
my
was the first time
gosh.
I've watched it since becoming a parent, I was like, I'll feel it for all three of us.
It's that one. That
Yeah.
one is really hard to watch.
The
Having
waterworks.
become a parent.
There were some waterworks.
Oh man, I mean the
I'm not afraid to admit it.
the very thick kind, like really, like you can just almost cut it with a knife kind of compassion that the Admiral develops for Lal and Data
And
over
that's
the
the
course
setup
of that.
for that scene between Data
Oh,
and Lal. Is he
gosh.
comes out and he's just like, his hands were moving faster than I could see. And he's like almost tearing up,
Yeah.
you know. Oh, that great actor, great guest actor.
What a great episode.
Yep.
You know, it also
you were
Lal's
saying-
Lal's initial appearance actually reminds me of something that is, I'm not sure if it's quintessentially Canadian, but I'm pretty sure it is. It was an ad you might have seen in your youth. I am Astar, a robot.
It's
I
true.
can put my arm back on.
You can't,
but you
so
can't.
play safe.
So play safe. That
From the planet Danger.
from the planet Danger. It both made
Maybe he
me
made
want
that,
to
but
be
the
a robot.
original was terrifying because it was all
Oh, it was all practical effects
practical
and
effects.
real
Chainsaw blades,
spinning
and
blades.
arms coming off, sparks
Oh
flying
my
everywhere.
gosh.
Planet Danger.
Planet Danger.
They
but
scared us.
Astar's appearance really reminded me of Lal.
It's true.
They have a
Yep.
very similar look.
Very much so.
That sort of total
put
androgyny, like
more
lack
of
of pronounced
facial features on Lal, and you'd have
Yeah,
Astar. Basically.
yeah, that's true. But even that pixelated voice into a more natural sounding voice, you know, communicates something about the, whatever you might call it, the sort of aesthetic accoutrements of biology.
He is biting that female.
Riker goes right over the counter.
Oh,
I love
yeah.
that scene. That's so great.
Yeah, Data walks in right on it. Commander, what are your intentions with my daughter? He's just like, straightens up his shirt and just storms over there. He doesn't say anything. That's one of the best Riker moments, actually. Data took no rank there. He just looks at him and he's like, Commander. Wait, oh, yeah, Riker just looks over at Guinan, like, terrified. He's like, Guinan, what's happening here? Guinan's not going to help him.
I'm not getting involved
Yeah,
in that.
exactly.
She knows better than that. I imagine she's been in Data's place many times in some respects.
And of course,
you know?
the Admiral comes in just like, I don't think this is a good place for this android to be alerting. And Guinan's just like, Admiral, you've been in a few bars in your time. That didn't work, though. It actually made him mad. when
Yeah,
he
it
said
really
that.
did. Yeah, Guinan kind of flopped on that moment.
Yeah. Not enough listening, too much talking,
Yeah, could have been.
maybe.
Should have made him a Sumerian sunrise.
But I believe you were saying before I ended up with the offspring, you were saying about the
What I was saying.
you were saying about the
Like I often used to ask my students when I was teaching at a university, how did we get to this point? I would get like halfway through a class and I'd be like, what was I talking about up till
was it
now?
were you talking about emotional machines? Because I was like, Data can't feel them.
Oh yeah, the doctor and
yes,
his
the
feeling.
doctor, of course. There you go. I knew we'd get
Now
back to
here's
it.
a sense where your original question that we started with.
Yep.
And thank you for pointing me back toward this.
No problem.
Whether the sense of desire can or feeling can mean that there is a level of reality to the construct which exceeds simply the sort of print of the maker or the builder creator. That argument is articulated in almost every scene we see the Doctor.
I'm a doctor, not a database.
You know, there's almost always a reference to his peculiar physicality, or, you know, the scene ends and everybody else leaves and he's in the room and he's just, you know, can't leave the med bay at first, or and a bunch of the ways that we meet the Doctor physically are a great way of exploring this sense of an alien consciousness that looks a lot like us, because the Doctor outwardly looks like us, but inwardly there is no inside, right? He's a hologram, and yet he has feelings, complex, developing feelings, which Data, who has a solid body that's humanoid shaped, doesn't, right? So it's to me it's an interesting way of deploying that and exploring that bit by bit over time.
And he knows about cybernetic implants. He knows that they can cause skin irritation. Would you like an analgesic cream? I like that that's how he stalled the Borg in First Contact. He's like, what? Stall them. He's like, what? I'm stalled them. I'm a doctor. Not
Would you
a
like an
stall guy.
analgesic cream?
I'm a doctor, not a counterinsurgent.
Yeah. Borg implants can cause
Skin irritation. It would be funny if the Borg was just like, I would really love an analgesic cream.
This unit, when it
This
requires
like,
it.
This unit has been itching.
What you don't see on the Borg ship when they just show up at the pharmacy. This unit requires Gold Bond. Oh, man.
Well, Dave, is this the dystopia?
You mean right now?
Yeah.
I think it's a not great topia in some respects, but I think it's still...
Is it all smooth sailing from here?
Oh.
Will we steer a better course? Will we embrace the art of steering on our planet and steer towards that Star Trek horizon?
Put our tiller toward the
Embrace
first star
our
on the
cybernetics.
left. Straight on till morning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a wonderful line in Dante that talks, and I may have actually quoted it some months ago in another episode, that talks about Ulysses' headlong flight past the Pillars of Hercules. And that was a flight out past the bonds of reason, out past the bonds of any kind of limit on recklessness or on heeding the development as well as the impulse of your desire.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps what we can say most firmly is that we have been running headlong for a long time in the pursuit of various desires on this planet. And perhaps what a real science of systems, a real science of the governance of developing feedback-oriented, dynamically interrelated systems that develop both forward and backward in time in some respect, in respect of memory, right? Could actually be a great thing for us. Maybe it's another way of developing consciousness as a species that we're actually getting ourselves ready for. And that to me is a hopeful thought.
Me too.
End transmission.
What's this one? Oh, Blue Moon.
Proximity alert.
Wait. There's a proximity alert, Dave. Dave?
A what?
I don't recognize... Do you recognize this? What does this mean? What does this mean?
Oh, goodness me. Oh, turn around right now.
Why? What is it?
Turn around. That's a Cybernetics class ship.
What? A warbird?
Yeah. I don't know what it's doing out here.
What's turning around gonna do?
Just go in the other direction.
What does that sound? What does that sound?
Is that a... Oh.
Weapons alert.
What?
Weapons alert.
Is that a tractor
Are
beam?
they firing at us?
Oh, no! Why would they...
We only got 2 dates into our tour.
I know.